The reason this matters is not because of vanity. Like, not everybody needs a lot of followers. Not everybody cares about a book deal. Like, that's our world a bit and some of our clients. But what we all care about is trust. The trust of our colleagues, the trust of our family, the trust of our peer, like our peers, our bosses, the people who work for us. And 74% of Americans say they're more likely to trust you if you have a personal brand, which makes sense because we trust people that we see.
Isn't that true? Like, stay on that. Like, celebrities, right? Like, we don't even really know them. In some cases, it's a stage name almost, right? And but because we see them all the time, we actually form an opinion about whether they're trustworthy or not. And we've never even met them, probably will never meet them in most cases. Yet
we don't even know their real name, like a lot of times.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So this matters for everybody, you're basically saying.
Well, yeah, let me point out some specific ones. I brought the study just because I thought we might grab a few points. But when you look specifically at we asked the question, like, who does this really matter for? And we said, like, okay, do you care? The average American, do they care if like their business coach has one, or their insurance agent, or like, who are the people you care about having a personal brand? And the number one profession out of all of them was doctors.
Wow.
61% of Americans say they want their doctor to have an established personal brand.
Oh my gosh.
59% said their employer, 58% said their lawyer, and 55% said their financial advisor. And here's what we started to realize. The higher the requirement for trust, the more having a personal brand matters. If you're going to cut me open, I need to trust you.
Right.
Like, I can't just meet you and in 5 minutes be like, okay, let's do this. And so more and more that's happening. And I have to tell you, Ed, like, I was late to social media. Like,
me too.
Social media, yeah, you were, but you've done better with it than I have. But I, for a long time, didn't understand, why would you post what you're eating and like what you're doing all day? Like, why would anyone care about that? And then I realized, for many of us, that the people that you trust the most in your life, like if you just made a list, who do you trust the most? It's going to be people that you see most often, and it's going to be the people you know the best. You know what they like to eat. You know where they live. You know their kids' names. You know where they go. You know who their friends are. You know what they do for fun. Like, you know how they spend their time on their weekends. And then the other one is that we trust people that we learn from.
Ooh.
And that becomes the big door opener for the business aspect of all of this, but not to discount the personal sides. Those things really matter. Your book launch was incredible. I mean, 100,000 copies of a book sold before the book comes out is not something that we've ever seen, that we've ever been a part of. And it's because you have so much trust with your audience. You have so much reputation. We've never worked with someone that had as much reputation and as much reach as you did.
Thank you.
So while we maybe taught you a couple things, you're super gracious about that.
You did.
It was your reputation, our systems, but it was just amplified because at the end of the day, it's about trust.
So good. The digitization of your reputation. And that, I've noticed that play for me in different ways too. So yeah, it helped move my book and other things that I do. It helps move this show, obviously having a very significant following. But the trust part of it is more important than even how big the following is. But then there's been other things that have happened for me where different businesses I have, someone's got involved who didn't know me, but then checked me out and went, oh, he's legit because he has a personal brand.
Totally.
So I think a lot of people think, well, I've got 2,000 followers or 800 followers. I don't have to have a personal brand, nor do I have one. Incorrect, because it's almost like a validation of your reputation. It can happen in reverse. So maybe they don't find you, but after they find you, now they're going to confirm you.
Totally.
Right?
And that's what they're doing. That's what employers are doing. I mean, one of the things that we say a lot now is we say reputation precedes revenue. Reputation precedes revenue. People think, oh, I have a revenue problem. You don't have a revenue problem. You have a reputation problem. Not enough people know about you, or they know about you and they don't trust you to get the job done. So when you look at like the business world, it is that. But even if you're an employee trying to get a job, their companies are, their formal hiring process is go look at them on Facebook, go look at them on Instagram, go listen to what they have. And here's another thing that the study showed. People don't care about how many followers you have.
Wow.
People don't care
Wow.
across all generations. It is one of the least significant factors of credibility and trust is how many followers you have. You know what else people don't care about? They don't care if you have a New York Times bestselling book.
Yeah. Okay.
We can prove empirically that people don't value, the public doesn't. Now, the industry does, but the average person on the street, we can prove, doesn't know the difference between a Wall Street Journal bestselling author, an Amazon bestselling author, a self-published author. They found blogs to have as much credibility. If you have a blog, you have as much credibility as someone who is a New York Times bestselling author with the average person on the street. They don't care about followers, but they do care about when they see you, what do you project? What do you believe? What are you about? What are you teaching and promoting? And who are you?
Yeah, and I think we're going to talk about how to create that too, because I look at a lot of people's stuff that follow me. You know, I'll just click on their profiles and I'm just confused. You know, there's not a narrative there. It's very it's hit and miss. I don't understand it. You know, when I was growing up, my dad always said, "Hey, Eddie, it's not what you know, it's who you know." And I now tell my kids, it's not really what you know or who you know, it's who knows you. Now, who knows you? And this applies, what you just said that was so relevant is, if you have a job, the likelihood of someone hiring you or you getting promoted or finding upward mobility where you are is now connected to that brand. So this is not just an entrepreneurial thing to some extent. So you also said it's sort of like a trust accelerator for people too. How so?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we buy from people that we trust. We recommend people that we trust.
There you go.
We know that 82% of Americans say they're more likely to buy from a company, and they find a company more influential if they recognize the founder and they align with the founder's personal brand and values. But 30% of Americans in this study said they're more likely to date somebody who has an established personal brand because there's validation to who you are, right? You don't want to get catfished. You can, it's one thing to kind of like, fake a profile on a dating site. It's another to go, oh, you have a website and you're on social media, you have all of these different things. And by the way, coming back to the business thing, the number one thing that drives credibility for businesses is testimonials from your customers.
Okay.
It is not your credentials. It is having other people who have said you are good at what you do. That's how it's done.
It's interesting because on social media, it's funny. And a couple businesses that I own now, I'm always telling our folks, like, hey, when you help somebody, whether it be with a financial thing or a real estate transaction or one of our products, like if you could get that put on video where they're thanking you or they're watching the process, because that for me is credibility too. Like that thing about cutting me open, the surgeon, I don't want it to be your first procedure.
Yeah.
So
right,
if I feel like you've helped lots of people, and by the way, lots of people in a personal brand could be 5, right? It could be 8 reviews. It could be 8 video testimonials. It could be written testimonials. Like, okay, this isn't their first rodeo. They've done this before. So what would you say to someone who goes, okay, I probably should get better at doing this whole personal branding thing. Where does one begin if they've not begun? Or what should they adjust if they've started and it just hasn't been effective for them yet?
Yeah, I mean, here's the whole secret to personal branding in one sentence. And this is not a Rory Vaden quote. I wish it was. Okay. But there was a guy named Larry Winget who told me this early in my career. And Larry said, the goal is to find your uniqueness and exploit it in the service of others.
Very good.
Find your uniqueness and exploit it in the service of others. And when you go look at someone's social media profile and you go, I don't know what this person does, they haven't clarified their uniqueness. They're not clear about the role they play in the world. And this ties more to just personal brand. It's not social media and it's not logos and colors and graphics. It's your purpose, right? It's being clear about how can I serve? How can I be of value? So many people are trying to find their purpose. And I think the wrong question is, don't ask, what's my purpose? That's the wrong question to ask. Instead, ask, who can I serve? How can I be of value? And as you get clear on that, that is your uniqueness. Our lives have meaning in the context of our relationship with others. And there's nothing like the feeling you get when you serve another person, when you help another person. There's no replacement for that feeling.
Very good, Rory. Do you think that, by the way, this is where sort of personal optimization and personal branding begin to converge too, right? So this is why they're the same thing to some extent. But do you think that also involves what problem do you solve? Meaning that when I go look at your personal brand, I understand your purpose and your mission and all of that. But for me to really connect with you, isn't there sort of an embedded command in there to some extent? Like, this is a problem I can help you solve.
Totally. Yeah. When you kind of make it tactical, you know, like when we first sit down with a client, the genesis of building a personal brand is answering one question with one word. What problem do you solve? And if you're not clear about the problem you solve, no one else ever will be.
You nailed it. Yeah.
They never will be, because there's so much noise. There's millions and millions of people out there. There's so many people who do something similar to what you do. And the real reason why people don't grow more on social media, or they don't get hired more, or they don't get promoted, or they don't attract more customers, or they don't get more donors for their nonprofit or more members for their church, or whatever the thing is because they're not clear.
Yeah.
And it's because they have too many different things going on. And if you have diluted focus, you get diluted results.
Very good.
If you have diluted focus, you get diluted results. But if somebody comes and says, "Hey, Ed, who helped you launch your book?" And you go, "Oh, I got a guy like Rory, like who helps you clarify your position in the marketplace?" "Oh, yeah, brand builders, Rory, like that. I got a guy who solved that." Now, the problem we technically solve is obscurity, which is to be unclear, untrusted, or unknown. But for each individual person, it is answering that question: what problem do I solve?
Well, the specificity part is big. So even when I met you, and even like other guys that I know that are good friends of mine that you've also worked with, like Lewis House, for example, it is even making us at our level more clear, more specific. When I go look at most people's personal brand, to me, it's confusing. I said this earlier. I do believe, tell me if you, and by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's good to show a diversity of who you are. In other words, if you're just one thing all the time, I think your social, your blog, your life can be somewhat, I kind of know what I'm going to get when I go see you. Maybe I'm not likely to see it all the time. So I think showing, hey, I'm a mom, I also work out, I'm also a realtor, here's some testimonials, here's people I've helped. One thing that does confuse me sometimes is I'll watch someone's brand and I'm thinking, oh, this is a professional, let's just say, I use the term a realtor.
Okay.
And wow, what a great mother and an unbelievable person. And she's funny and she's completely competent and has done this kind of a deal, another kind of a deal. And then maybe like the next picture is her sort of like, you know, in a bikini in some salacious environment. And I'm like, what part of that do you think is going to make me or my wife be comfortable with doing business with you? In other words, they do things in their brand, one or two things that is either A, confusing, or I might think, what were you thinking about yourself when you were, I'm not saying that you can't post, listen, you're flexing with your shirt off. I work out in a tank top sometimes. I'm not saying that, but do you agree that sometimes I'm like, what are we doing here? This seems like an unfocused person on their brand.
Yeah, that's it. And I think you really do need to sort of decide, like, am I using this as a mechanism for attracting business to me, right? If you're a realtor, now I think you can have one profile and you can do it, but you have to do it tastefully, and you have to kind of go like, all right, you know, grandma is watching and my colleagues are watching and my prospects are watching. And so I have to play to that audience and be mindful of it, or go have a private account that you do, you know, like some people aren't comfortable posting pictures of your kids. That's fine. You don't have to post pictures of your kids to be successful. You can, and people get to see that other dimension of you. But when you a brand is, what do people think of when they think of you? And so you don't control that, but you influence it. And you have to be deliberate about it and mindful about it, and you have to craft it because it's your reputation. I think people get lost when they think, the moment we say personal branding, they go, oh, social media, I don't understand it, technology, graphics, video, I don't know. They get lost and just go reputation.
Very good.
Reputation. Yeah. Curate your reputation. What do you want people to say about you? What do you want people to think about you? What do you want people to know about you? And be mindful.
And it needs to be authentic too, right? Like, it can't be orchestrated. So, for example, in my case, I think probably people think about me as an entrepreneur or a speaker, or hopefully an inspirational guy. But I'll also post stuff. Hey, last night I had a cigar and a glass of tequila. That's part of my life, right? So, but within reason, By the way, this stuff is not I said earlier, bikini. I've male guys that I watch on social media. I'm like, brother, you've got this entire insurance operation you have. You've got this wonderful family. Why are we posting you completely drunk on a boat on a Sunday afternoon where you're slurring your words? Like, maybe that's not part of the reputation you want to put out there. Having a cocktail, of course, that's part of what you do. You should be open about it. I just feel like, and again, we're going down to social media now, but as you said earlier, branding is all over. It's not just social media. It's everything about you. What are dares? And how does that sort of fit into a little bit about what we're talking about? I love things that you can just remember. That's what you're great at doing. Because with me, some really complicated things we went through, and I'm like, okay, I can remember dares. I can remember XYZ. I can remember the helix, which we'll talk about in a minute. So go ahead and tell us what dares means.
Yeah. So dares is an acronym that represents how to select the best ways to monetize your personal brand, right? So that's where reputation, when you turn your reputation into revenue and you turn that corner to say, I want to monetize this, we say, okay, we got to figure out a business model. And just like if you have diluted focus with your message, you get diluted results. If you have diluted focus with your business model, you also get diluted results. You and I are totally in a line. In fact, you posted something recently that I was like, amen, about the multiple streams of income. You don't get rich by having multiple streams of income. You have one really freaking awesome stream of income. Diluted focus, diluted results. So when we are working with a client, there's not a one-size-fits-all, right? It's your uniqueness. So we're trying to figure out what are you best positioned for, and so we look for the dares. So the acronym is things that are D, digital.
D, digital, okay.
A, automated.
Okay.
R, recurring.
Recurring.
E, evergreen. And S, scalable. Digital, automated, recurring, evergreen, and scalable. So if there was a perfect business model, it would have, no manufacturing costs, right? It's digital, so you don't have to ship anything. You don't have to store it. There's not like tariffs and boats and delays. It's automated, meaning people can completely self-serve.
Very good.
You don't have to have a huge army of people to deliver it. It's recurring, so people are paying not just once, but again and again and again. And, when it comes to the valuation of a company, recurring revenue is tremendously valuable. Evergreen means it never needs to be updated.
Ooh.
It never needs to be updated. You do it once, and then scalable is you can add an infinite number of customers without adding additional infrastructure.
So that's the ideal.
That's the ideal, but it doesn't exist.
Right.
Because some of these work in conflict. So like, for example, recurring and evergreen tend to work in conflict because recurring revenue means I'm going to pay you again and again and again, but evergreen means you never need to update it. So you're not likely to pay again and again for something that doesn't need to be updated. By the way, Netflix is the closest business that I've found that has all of these, but even Netflix has to always add new content. So it's evergreen in the sense that you have access to this library, but they're always adding new content. But it's not that one is better than the other, right? I mean, Sarah Blakely, sells Spanx. Our friend Jamie Kern-Lima, right, does It Cosmetics. Those are physical items. They made tons of money.
Of course.
And then you've got, other info marketers who sell courses or whatever. And a lot of our clients are professional service people. They're lawyers and they're accountants and they're doctors and they're chiropractors. So they're selling a service.
Let's talk about them for a minute and a little bit of this brand DNA helix, because this is why you're so great. So there's 6 parts to it. Let's talk a little bit about that. So this is help all of you. It's going, okay, what do I do? Right? Like
how do you figure this out?
Why do I figure this stuff out? So go ahead.
Yeah. So if you say, okay, the goal is to find your uniqueness and exploit it in the service of others, then the question is, how do I find my uniqueness?
Yes.
And that is literally $1 million question. I mean, that is the first thing everyone hires us to do is go. And so we have this brand DNA helix, these 6 questions. And if you were to answer these 6 questions and you just sort of like brainstormed them and put them all the answers on the table, the intersection of the answers is your uniqueness lies at the intersection. So the first question we already talked about, which is what problem do you solve? Okay. So what are the problems you can solve for other people? You make a list. The second question is what are you passionate about? Like, what are you on fire for? That's how we started, right? Is I love you because you're on fire. You're not just on a mission, you're on a crusade.
Stay there. I want to stay right there because this is brilliant. I bet no one's asked you this before. Do those have to necessarily be connected? In other words, the problem I solve What if what I'm passionate about is slightly different than the problem I solved? I'm going to scramble you here a little bit because I've thought about this. When I started in the business, I was solving financial problems for people.
Yeah.
But my passion was actually to help children because I was working in an orphanage.
Yep.
But when you would get around me, you'd say, this guy's unbelievable solving these financial problems, and he's doing it because everything he does, 20% of it's going to help these orphans and these kids. And so the convergence of those two things, even though they were different, worked incredibly well for me. I know ideally the problem being solved would somehow be correlated to the passion. I get that. But does that necessarily have to be the same thing?
I think that it almost never is in the beginning.
Great. Okay.
In fact, the fastest path to cash is to figure out what problem can you solve the fastest for somebody else.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. I started my speaking career.
Mm-hmm.
The very first way I made money was I was in a contest called the World Championship of Public Speaking, and I was 20 years old, and I thought, hey, if I win the World Championship, maybe that'll launch my career. The problem was I wasn't funny. And so I spent like 18 months learning the psychology of laughter and humor. And so the very first courses I taught was the psychology of laughter and how to be funnier. And that was how we started. And then, I had gone door to door 14 hours a day, 6 days a week on straight commission for 5 summers in college. And so I knew something about sales. And so we started a sales training business and we coached salespeople. So they lead to one another. But look at what you're doing now, Ed. You are living the convergence of those two now.
Correct.
But the way to make money fastest is to go, what tactical problem can I solve for people?
Okay.
Right? And do that. And you go, if people pay for solutions to problems.
Yeah.
So if you need money, it's because you're not solving enough problems. You're not adding enough value and you're not clear about what you do. And that's why nobody's hiring you or they're not paying you enough money.
This is exactly right. By the way, listen, this just flies by people's ears. They're driving or they're on the treadmill right now or they're walking and they're like, yeah. Listen to what he just said. If you don't have a lot of money, more than likely it's because you don't solve or people don't believe you can solve problems and you haven't got clear. Everybody, my family here in the audience, you must get more and more clear about what problems it is that you can solve and being better at communicating specifically that you can do it. And the second one, and I took you off track a little bit, was what are you passionate about? So I want you to stay on this helix a little bit, the 6 parts, but listen to this, everybody. This is the thing. This is the path. And yes, it's a broad concept, but the more you begin to contemplate this idea of, you know what, he's right. I'm not completely clear, nor are other people in my brand what problems I solve. Whether you're an electrician apprentice who's looking to get hired into a union job, all the way to I'm an entrepreneur trying to scale a cannabis business. I don't know, right? Like this applies to everybody. Heck, I think it applies to what kind of a great father or mother you are.
Totally.
Right? That my mother's amazing at this, right? This is the problem she solves for our family, right? My mom's so passionate about our family or this or the other thing. So keep going on the 6 parts of the helix.
Yeah, so I would say to wrap those first 2 questions up, you make a living from the problem you solve, but you make a life from the passion that you chase.
That's good. Really good.
Like if you make money and you just make money, eventually you're burnt out. That's a great place to start because you got to pay the bills. Like you need money to be able to do stuff.
Yep.
But then ultimately you got to chase the passion. And it's not just like this fires me up, but also what pisses you off? What breaks your heart? Like what makes you cry? What makes you look at it in the world and you go, I'm not okay with that. I'm not comfortable with that. I won't accept that. We believe that is God's divine design of your humanity, that what breaks your heart for a reason because you were created to do something about that problem. And your real magic will come from living in the passion, but you have to earn your right to get there first.
That was one of my top things ever said on the show. Everybody go back and rewind about 1.5 minutes and hear that again. That's one of my favorite things ever been said on the show. Keep going. Unbelievably great.
So the next 2 questions, okay, so you got what problem you solve, and then what are you passionate about? The next 2 questions are what do you research? Okay, so your uniqueness will be tied to things you learn, not just what you have a degree in, but what would you spend a Saturday afternoon learning about?
Okay.
Because you're going to have expertise in that. Like you're going to be drawn to that. That's a hint towards your uniqueness. Like this stuff for me, all this stuff, I mean, this is fun for me. Like, I love studying speakers and book launches and social media and funnels and like messaging and positioning, like reputation. It's what I would do for free.
Yeah.
So what do you have academic head knowledge of? That's what do you research? The fourth question is, though, a big one. What do you have results in? So this is the companion, and the reason this is a helix is because each of these questions work in tandem, which is not what have you learned, but what have you actually freaking done? What path have you walked down? And I'll tell you, Ed, because it normally takes us, it's normally a 2-day experience to help someone find their uniqueness, but I'll give you the shortcut.
Okay.
And this is something we didn't know 4 years ago when we started the company, but now we've had over 600 clients. And this is what we train our strategists to do when they're working with somebody, to go, how do we find your uniqueness quickly?
Okay.
And this is it. All of us are most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were.
Oh, wow. Gosh.
You're most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were. And so when you look at the problem you solve, right, it's going, what challenge have I conquered? What obstacle have I overcome? What setback have I survived? Whatever that path is, that is the shortest, clearest path to changing a life and making a ton of money and being full of purpose and just being on fire because you're living your divine uniqueness.
Oh my gosh, Rory, that's so freaking good.
And that's what you do, right? That's the reason people respond to you is because you're taking people on the path. You know, I love when you tell the stories of like your childhood and growing up and Eddie and like, you know, looking out for your sisters and then becoming wealthy and successful and paying the price. And you are this living model, an example of how anybody can do it.
Thank you.
You know, through the power of one more, and you know, all the things that you talk about.
Thank you.
But you're taking people on the journey, and so that is the shortest. That's the shortcut, if there is one, is to ask yourself, what challenge have you conquered? What obstacle have you overcome? What setback have you survived? You are most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were.
That is incredibly profound, man. Like that's. I listen to things sometimes in life, and I go, okay, let me put it through my application test of my own life. That's exactly what I did. I didn't know I was doing it. I wish someone earlier on would have said what you just said to me. And by the way, I've done that. All along the way in my life. Even now, people say, well, you coach some really affluent people, very wealthy people. I was once at their level of affluence. Right. I was once at their level of confusion. I was once at their level of, you know, achievement without fulfillment. You know, I understand these different elements. And so it's so good what you're saying. You want to finish that helix up. I want to make sure we give them the little
okay, good. Yeah, so we'll leave you hanging on 5 and 6. So the 5th and 6th questions are related to how do you monetize a personal brand. So this is where we start to step into that. So the 5th question is, what are all the things that people would buy from you? And so you go, all right, how do I make money from this? The 6th question is, what business do you want to be in? And that's what the dares is all about.
Yep.
Okay, so we already talked about dares. So if you back up and go, all right, we're looking for the dares. That's like, what business do I want to be in? Look for the dares. Like those are the great businesses. But then Then if you ask yourself the question, what are all the things people would buy? This is where you go, there's a big difference between a pile of followers and a pile of cash.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only 5 vehicles that we have really found, that will convert a audience or fan base or people into a pile of money. And we call these the PAIDs. So it's another acronym. So PAIDS. So the P is product, physical product, right? So that's Jamie Kern-Lima, that's Sarah Blakely. You create a product. If you're Elon Musk, it's a car, right? Like you create a product and you sell it to people. The A is ads and affiliates. It's part of how you make money on this show, right? You got shout out to our sponsors, right? For the Ed Mylett Show. Yes. That they pay the bills, and you're not actually selling your audience anything. You're selling other people access to your audience. Wow. And those are, if you're really good at throwing a party and if you're really good at getting people together, ads and affiliates are a great business model. The I is information. So you go, all right, I have this audience. I'm going to offer them information. So that's why there's been the explosion of video courses and membership sites and certifications and assessments. And a lot of our clients are experts and entrepreneurs who have either some information product or a vision for one. And then D is deals.